when you have quotes. You know.
You move way too far away.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's because your knee is in my way.
Can people hear us? Welcome to Long Live Podcast. I'm Jimmy. This is Jack. We're going to talk about something different today. Hopefully every time
It's kind of the same.
Well, it's different than the same.
What's different about it?
Well, I don't know, last week we spoke about, how concepts chain us. And maybe this one's kind of going to be like how we can get ourselves out of the chain.
Okay.
You know, as the title chapter said, it's real anarchism as opposed to conceptual anarchism. All right. So I just got Jack to read some of it, and it's an interesting thing to talk about. The chapter's called Autonomy from Language, and I've forgotten the whole chapter now. The idea is just that there is an autonomous will underneath, preset routines and all of that can actually enable you to.
Okay, it actually controls your own will as such. Right. Oh, well, it has a will of its own, which it takes over and sets you on that route.
Your own destiny outside of conceptual structures. Right?
Yeah. A part I really liked about it was how you kind of gave the analogy regarding going for a long walk or going for a walk. To be fair, that walk doesn't even you can end that walk at any time even.
Yeah, right.
So the idea was that you might not want to go for that walk because of the effort that when you look at the words like long walk, you might be thinking long is associated with something that will take a lot of time. It might take effort. Your time might be valuable as well. So you want to make sure that you're spending your time wisely in the best and kind of most efficient way, as if. Its length would the length is always going to be the same, how the sort of amount of time that you have. So it's I don't know, but when you start associating these things that are not actually there, such as the walk might take a long time and therefore that's gonna give you some effort, but going on that walk might be really enjoyable, and it might not be something you do often as well. So it's going to kind of break up your day in a nice. And if you think about it in the way of you're spending your time doing that, you got many hours until you go to sleep or something, right? But and so you're oh, what should I do before I'm going to work tomorrow? I'm gonna do the same thing that I do every time, watch a movie or play some video games, something, right? Whereas you could do something a bit different. Yeah. But you might have these concepts stopping you.
I think it comes down to the fact that there's so much that's up to interpretation over what we can actually how we actually picture the world. And make our decisions to act in it, and we think that so much of it is preset, when of course it's clearly something much. What was I saying? Sorry, I got distracted by a message. There's that we think that there are so many preset ways to do things we have to spend time in this way, and we have to treat other people in this way, and we have to, do this in this way. But there's actually there's so much different. When I talk about the autonomy of from language, I talk about the flicker, which is kind of this idea that we are constantly following conceptual structures and whatever path they take us, but occasionally we might get this kind of flicker, this sort of hold on. I want to do this. I don't want to do this. I want to do this. And we normally ignore it. But this is that's actually the world opening up to you.
You might see it as an impulse, right? Because you might be I want to fucking quit this job.
Yeah.
I can't. I've got bills to pay. Right. Or whatever it is. But as an easy example, probably one that a load of people relate to. As much as myself as well. But then you might have that glimpse of freedom, or actually kind of doing your own thing, or maybe spending your time on doing something that's a bit more worthwhile or more enjoyable as well, or something that doesn't want to make you kill yourself or whatever.
Yeah, right.
I like how the smoke you can see the delay. We've got about, this is about an hour long, we've got about 2 or 3 more of those bad boys to look forward to.
2 or 3 more cigarettes.
I noticed as well that it was really close to the, you could see it in the central, it was kind of you're bringing attention to it. Almost.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
But yeah. Well, I think what's interesting about the flicker is like, I don't know. It's hard to sort of describe. I'll find a part.
There are examples of some flickers
Yeah.
that you may have had.
I mean, everyone has them. That's the thing. Everyone
Yeah.
has the these flickers. So, for example, let's just read them. I think I'm better at writing than I am explaining my writing. To begin with, one will occasionally hear the voice of one's will, but be prejudicial against it. One may call this the opening up of the will as the flicker. It is useful, then, to ask where the will comes from. What is the intention of the will? Why does it exist? This flicker of the autonomous will to decide may indeed be choked out, and choked out by the will of language and the will of concept. Does one wish to walk somewhere new, build a fire, read a new book, but find themselves blocked by something? Despite this lingual and conceptual blocking insisting that all flickers of potential autonomy are useless, this flicker must be the thing most considered if one wishes to make one's autonomy distinct. This is not a case of rationality or logical reasoning that chokes this will out, for language should be used to support rationality and never the other way around, as I shall make clear in the next chapter. Nevertheless, it is the assumptions and prejudices of the particular webs and codes of language itself that prevent this flicker of the autonomous will from even being considered, let alone acted out. For example, one may not want to take a walk to the forest like this flicker of the will wishes, but perhaps because the web of words of a long walk is tied with effort and hard work is tied with unhappiness and therefore suffering. The web of words is particular to person, so all inspection must also be particular. I have to change one of the negatives there. So I mean, this is based on an experience I had in March, where like I realised that I hadn't slept, and I went to meet my friend who's actually messaging me now, and I sort of said, well, actually, I feel like we should go to the beach, but I don't. That's crazy. That's a crazy idea.
Especially this like season, but it's cool. It's nice.
Well,
It's nice.
In March it was pretty cold as well.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And and we realised that like it would make sense. I'd have to. He would have to go home, and I'd have to go home. We'd have to eat something and get and we would have to get beers. It just didn't make sense. And then we were like, actually, should we just do it anyway? Because there was this sort of flicker that opened up, and you have to be very courageous to actually like go with it. Be like, actually, this flicker is something that I want to do.
Yeah.
Of all these things that are surfaced, I'm actually the one to come up with something that I want to do in life.
Was it kind of like the things around it were impractical?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember the same friend we have when we were driving back to your house in your mum's house in like Sandgate, and I can't remember exactly what was impractical, but I was like, Jimmy, no, we can't go back to yours and listen to vinyls tonight. It would be impractical. And then I can't remember. And then Alex was like, yeah, it would be impractical. Do you remember? Yes, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there were maybe there were concepts. I don't know. Maybe there were real things surrounding it. I don't think they were that big actually. It was probably just something stupid like. Can't remember.
Well, once you do that, it sort of opens up more doorways into like. Other potentialities that come out that kind of suggest, this is what you want to. This is actually what you want to do. For example, I'm making a plan. You make a plan for a day, and it just sort of there's your day, and you sort of, and we are sort of in this social world, especially, we are left like so without any actual choice over what we do, not because the choice isn't there, but because we just simply ignore it. Like the choice to make a fire or to do this or to make this. It's the choices themselves are actually like blocked off by our conceptual mind. And this is partially why I titled this podcast Real Anarchism, because you can't just go against conceptual structures in order to find your autonomous will, because you're still playing in the same set of rules. Like you're saying, oh right. Society says I should get a job, therefore I won't get a job, and you're actually empowering.
Oh, because you mentioned how going left, if you're instinctively chosen to, where you have to go left something, you might want to be like, I know how we can rebel against the concept is by doing the entire opposite. Going right without realizing that actually going right instead of going left would still have that kind of idea of it's still I'm not sure how you might be able to articulate it better than me, but it's still chained to that concept of because it's a direct opposite, or as it were. It's still kind of linked to that whole. Well, the only reason you might choose right is because it's that opposite of left, and you're thinking that's going to be therefore the solution, whereas the solution will probably be actually getting outside the box entirely. Whereas
getting out of the one-dimensional line of rules.
Yeah.
So we don't rebel against society because it sort of it implies that the society actually has this kind of empowering sort of like thing that we need to rebel against. The actual solution is to sort of acknowledge that society does not exist, and there's no actual paradigm to face except our own paradigms. We walk around with society in our minds. There is no, for example, there is no government. We talk about like this Italian Australian guy spoke about this, which is really interesting. That's not is the building government? No. Well, it's the building. Or is Boris Johnson the government? No, he's just a talking head. What is the government? Like a piece of paper? Where is the government? It's in our heads. We are the government. Like
you'll come up with your own kind of conceptions of what it means as well, because you could say, fuck the government, they don't fill potholes, and it's kind of like that's one small section of a council of a local government. Or you might you can I guess having that kind of thinking might be like what creates hive minds, or hypothetical hive minds in the minds of the people, where they're thinking like that group of people, they're all like that. That group of people, because they've got that kind of name attached to them, and then you don't actually realise the individual within those groups. That's a bit of a dangerous way of thinking, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, like, if I think about that, it's like interesting that we do identify. We don't identify ourselves as complying with these things, complying with governmental laws. The only state of actual government is compliance to government, in my opinion. I talk about the concept of the legal in my book. Like in that chapter, in this chapter, Autonomy from Language, in which we have to determine what parts of the law are founded on reality of virtue or real morals, or whatever you want to call it, like something that's like a natural, like something that should be good for the leading of virtue, and when it's just conceptual. Calling Extinction Rebellion protesters extremists is just like where we need to find the reality in that situation, in that statement. So what is if there's an action that's going on in the world that this protest is doing that is not leading to virtue, and often we can't find anything if we look at things in the real.
You don't even have to look at the word extreme as being bad. It's only got the connotation wrapped around it. Extreme metal or something is not bad metal. Right. For example. Exactly.
And I mean, like, it may be much easier rather than to look at what's real, because in the ethics of the real, I talk about like how it's very difficult to work out what the right action is, but very easy to work out what the wrong action is. Yeah. So which is why, in the same vein, like looking at what language is how the conceptual is not real is probably easier than trying to deduce what is real. When we're talking about extreme protests, if we're looking at just people on blocking a road or whatever, if we're looking at that, and we're saying that that's bad, I can't find any reality that connects it. I can find a lot of unrealities, such as the road needs to be used for cars, and people need to get to work, and we must obey the law, and extremism is bad. I can find loads of conceptual connotations that imply that this is that are completely false, but I can't see any reality of the extremists.
It's a good way to look at it. I think it might have been, was it Alan Watts maybe that said the thing about how a sculpture is defined by what you're taking away from you've got this pillar of stone, and you actually create the art piece by taking away from that pillar
Right.
and cutting it out.
Right, and it could be a very likely thing that we can see the real. We can find the real by just making the game of conceptualization ridiculous and just sort of being like, well, what's the alternative? And then I sort of advocate these sorts of like these non-conceptual flickers, like these like
Considering that you can't exactly describe the real using language in the sense that because language is in itself not real and conceptual. If you've you'll probably be like not be able to the same way you can't kind of like define like a nirvana feeling as such. You just have to kind of get it. You could probably remove all these fake unrealities and concepts to then sort of come to the conclusion, but that ultimately may not be something you can actually kind of define as just words in itself. You might have to break past off of it to actually get to it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, man. I mean, like you said about sculpture, it's very much like that. But there are so many examples. Like when we're talking about when we talk about money, you can just turn the game into something ridiculous. You can say, right, if £3 exchange equates to roughly half an hour of labour, and so does a coffee exchange equates to roughly £3, then can we not exchange half an hour of labour for a coffee in a shop? If I said, okay, I'll mop your floor and you give me a coffee or whatever, something like that, and this just.
That might be quite a practical way.
I don't think this necessarily leads to virtue, but it definitely insinuates how ridiculous the conceptual game really is when we're talking about.
It might lead people to spend money in different ways,
right.
Because if you're a sort of impulsive online shopper or something like that, or just an impulsive shopper in general, the idea of like a fiver, you might be kind of like, is this worth my half hour of labour? Right. But I don't think people look at it that way, do they?
Right, and you could look at like your £5 and be, is this worth my life expectancy going down by half an hour for the sake of this £5 note?
What it can bring me, yeah.
Right, and you can sort of
which it might not bring you anything. You might just put it in the bank.
You can I think you can sort of manipulate conceptual structures, or sort of just like see them to their end, and then they sort of get an apparent ridiculousness in the game. I mean, yeah, this is something that
Check out this video resolution shit. Have you seen this?
It's funny, isn't it?
384 by 240. I don't think that's true, is it?
It's very low, isn't it?
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
It's like there was a loud noise. I say it sounded like a bomb or something, but I don't want to jinx it. Is it all good here? Oh, fucking cares anyway. If they want a bit of a small resolution, it's all good. It's just
well, that's just fucking internet or whatever, Excuse me.
So what's the next topic?
Okay, I'll read some. I'll read some more of the chapter. Yeah, so we spoke about money. Can you give me any examples of where you've sort of had this kind of autonomy? I mean, there are loads, but they're sort of difficult to remember because you can't lingualize them because they're just like these sort of flickers that even calling it a flicker is kind of in a sense sort of diminishing what it really is. It's really like your soul manifesting itself into something, some sort of realizing your own potential, and sort of realizing that you have limitless choices, but not in an existentialist way of just being 80,000 leagues in your chest. We are doomed to make choices. It's more of a kind of affirmation of, wow, we can make these choices, and this is something that we that sort of big culture or whatever sort of ignores within us. And another thing I noticed is that if people were more able to sort of realize their own autonomy, they would
sort of find themselves being, acting very different ways, which is why I kind of advocate like heterogeneity of cultures and communities. People will definitely be like, oh right, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, but it's like I've never thought of doing before, and we'd all sort of become sort of very different people, but because we won't be mediated through this very thickly mediated form of communication, or what you might call miscommunication. We would actually find ourselves freely able to determine what we wanted to do, and this is something that like I think is really important when we're when we're talking. But there are so many options. I can't even just talk about the options that you might have when you're actually thinking about freedom of action. Like, there are so many things to do, but we don't actually realize that.
Did you think about pulling your sleeves up just now?
Right, I don't know. Yeah, it's sort of
weird, isn't it?
It's weird. Yeah, it is weird. It is weird when you're talking about like, opening up your.
Did you think about grabbing that just now?
I want no.
You did, or
I think I might have done.
Might have,
like,
yeah.
but did I really?
It's still kind of.
You can play a lot of this into like unconsciousness. Like we are very unconscious a lot of the time, and we've these conceptual structures are something that we feel in our bodies. You get punched in the stomach every day for a year. You're gonna wince every time someone goes to like move their hand in your stomach. There's nothing in the real world indicating that you're going to get punched in the stomach again, but you're still going to. But the conceptual structure is felt in your stomach. Again, why is this important? Because we need to acknowledge reality, for fuck's sake, and slippery and indescribable it is. We are still needing. We still definitely very very much need to. Discover reality again.
Brings a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it can be it's like it's a real weird one because the thing that is the most true is the thing that we can't speak about, and when we find ourselves actually in the world properly, where we're surrounded by states of affairs and things that are going on. I don't like calling them things because I think things are like separate objects in the sort of way I describe them. But when we find ourselves in this sort of state, we find ourselves very much free of worry and regret and doubt and guilt and all of these other emotions. We just exist in the world.
Yeah, I suppose you only got kind of like one, well maybe not one, but like you've only got a certain amount of things to worry about in that sense. Because if you've got money worries, you've also got housing worries, and you've also got like maybe even status worries as well, depending on kind of what your social status is or what your kind of what your class is, if you're if you're upper class or whatever it may be. But if you're just a guy in the woods, your only worry is like food and shelter and water, sort of three things there, really.
Yeah, right.
As a very bare bones way.
You got nothing to lose.
You got nothing to lose. That's it. Mo money, mo problems. There's a reason our well-known philosopher Christopher Wallace said something like that. But you get the idea, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm just saying who's watching. Anyone, feel free to leave questions and comments on what we're talking about. We'd love to have an actual engagement with the people that we're communicating with. George says, talk about the abstraction of doing. Can you define that a little more, George? We'll get back to you, but like, be a bit. Yeah, you could do it in the comments on YouTube as well if you can, because then we can see it. Yeah, it's just. He said Okay, I'm trying to work out what the abstraction of doing can be. There is an I mean, the thing about freedom of action is that I don't think it's that separate from being.
It should kind of flow in the same.
It all flows.
You would only drink water because you're thirsty and your being is thirsty or whatever, right? You wouldn't have to kind of. It's like the idea of you wouldn't have to really sit down and think about the decision that you're making. You just kind of go in and do it, kind of impulsively, I suppose, as well. Impulsive actions may kind of be just sort of natural, just sort of how you go through life, as it were, and just kind of acting upon your feelings and just without thinking about it. I suppose nowadays in a society we live with, like language and all these other concepts, we would have to sort of think about what we're doing, what it might imply to other people. I think I have a worry sometimes about like stuff that I'm interested in might have like a connotation of like who I am as a person, might get misinterpreted, and it's like it's not who I am or whatever it is, and then you might well like kind of like close off your interest due to before I started pro wrestling, I didn't even tell anyone that I like wasn't even interested in wrestling. I didn't tell anyone that I was a pro wrestler at all until like 2 years afterwards. And I'm not really sure why. It just kind of like, and that's even that. I don't even know why as such. It was just kind of like I didn't want people to kind of get an idea of like who I am without me telling them who I am. But then again, like, I mean, people always will have like a separate you exists in everyone's heads, because there's an idea of like we can only assume who a famous person is based on the kind of what he presents to the world, but then obviously we don't know who that person is without being their friend or without being them, you know.
And I think my advocation is that abstractions are very dangerous, because we find ourselves you know, like thinking that, you know, Kevin Hart really is who we see Kevin Hart to be, or like who this basketball player is who we think the basketball player is, and in fact, you know, that we and in doing so, they're presented as I want to try and get back to what George was talking about. They're sort of presented as ideals. You know, we ideally become these famous, successful people, when in fact they all still have problems and idiosyncrasies and all the rest of it.
George, Rick's on the way. Soon, yeah.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay. George was saying, doing is the creative side of humanity. Capitalism abstracts us from this. It turns what we are doing into jobs for profit. It abstracts us from what we have done.
That could also some people, we've got a good friend of ours who doesn't really like to work on stuff because of the idea of what work says. He may not you know, it's called play the piano, not work the piano, for example. He may not want to make a video which we would all find entertaining. He might have a fun time in that journey as well, you know, whether or not. But he might not kind of like want to jump on that project because the idea of that like work and effort and kind of like it will take the fun away from things as well. Some people don't want to work jobs where Rick is actually an example. He doesn't want to be a musician like as a profession because he's got like a better job kind of as he is right now. A pro wrestler I once knew called Paul Robinson, he doesn't want to make that his full-time job because like everyone hates their job. In that way he's Paul is chained by the concept of, oh, I'm going to hate my job if I do it. Well, I don't know, it depends, because some people might get bored doing something 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Especially if you're doing like that's a lot actually. I don't think I'd want to like do some of the things I do. I like to break up what I do, right? So it's that's big. Let's talk about that.
Well, I mean, like we sort of find ourselves in you know, in places where we you know, we all have to do things that we don't like, but it may not necessarily have to. You know, it may not necessarily. But like, I think the important thing is that so many people there are many choices that we make throughout the day that have nothing to do with whether we have to do them or not.
Yeah.
I think those are the choices that, you know,
go back to this message again.
Yeah.
Because he said about how doing is the creativity of yourself.
Yeah, doing. I mean,
humanity.
Yeah. If we like, I can sort of see that as like the conceptual job.
Turns what we like doing into jobs for profit.
Doing, you know, work itself is simply moving towards a goal, or putting effort into something towards a goal. Obviously, like, you know, the conceptual outcome is capitalism turns this into profit and a specialized job. And this is a big problem, because we find ourselves like following the concept to the end, I suppose, you know, and not being aware that
there could also be the idea of like competitiveness might kind of bring some people down with how not just competitiveness, but the concept of like a success, where it's like you might just, some people, I hope there aren't many, but I mean I wouldn't be surprised if there are some people who might give up on their artistic output because they aren't reaching a sort of level of success in which they think they should be getting, where some of the podcasts might not get more than 200 views. That one with Slavoj Zizek got like fuckloads, but then some of them might have less views, and it's kind of like, should I stop podcasting? It's like, no, because you've still got like this close community of friends who are actually like watching these things, and you don't have to kind of like, we've got a painting there, let's just shove it off. This was made by Ethan, right?
Yeah.
I've got a friend called Ethan Shepherd. He made this nice painting, and it's like, I don't know, some people in Folkestone might have seen it before, but he doesn't just give up on making art because it might, he I don't know if he has an idea of like he might want his art to get to a certain position, but it's still enjoyed by people who see it, and it's in our fucking house, like that we enjoy it enough that we'll put it up on a wall.
It just exists.
It exists just for the sake of existing. It doesn't need like an idea of success. And I think maybe I could be misinterpreting what George is saying, but perhaps
I think you aren't. I think you aren't at all.
I think they are.
No, I think you aren't.
I think you are, man. I think you're right. But yeah, like that idea of like success maybe didn't even like exist in a way, or at least not in the same way.
I'll read this.
Not in the same way that
I'm
like
trying.
capitalism.
George says something. Yeah, George says something very interesting about like any idea of revolution needs to break the cycle of abstraction. Revolution through state must be avoided. I mean, I may even like say revolution through conceptual structures must be avoided as well. Mm-hmm. You know, if we're going to build revolutions on these, you know, on prior conceptualizations rather than, you know, something based on flickers of action in the real, we're going to just be stuck in like, oh, you know, like we'll just be opposing the law, you know. Oh right, no state, so no one, so no organization. Organization might be completely benign and a fair.
Like going opposite to it is just still the same.
Exactly, really, you're still adhering to a concept because it's the opposite of the.
It's kind of like going right as opposed to left. You're only doing that because that left exists in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, exactly, and I agree that revolution through state must be avoided. Revolution, but you know, there are so many kinds of revolution that should be avoided in order for like a sort of what we might call a real anarchism to come out. Such as you know, we have to acknowledge these unspeakable moments, or else we will just fall into concepts.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, we may create conceptual structures based on based on what the revolution might offer, and then of course we can find ourselves in better material and ideal conditions, but we need we need to avoid a sort of prescribed revolution and perhaps even like a grand solution to our problems. You know, we must not idealize this perfect future then attain towards it. This is a very dangerous thing to.
So because that perfect future is a concept.
It's a concept, and it's always going to leave out the intentions of the individuals. And what are the intentions of the individuals but unspeakable moments of clarity and joy? These moments are. You know, these moments can still inspire movements and all the rest of it. It's just that once we try and like say put a box and say this is how the revolution needs to take place.
You can't do that either because it's going to be.
We ignore the autonomy of the individual.
Yeah, I was going to say the individuals. You can't make a utopia because it's not going to be everyone's idea of a utopia.
Yeah.
Right. Similarly speaking, anyway. Not to say you shouldn't make these social revolutions if they better the majority of man, right? But
I mean, like, no,
be careful how you think about it, eh? Yeah.
The problem is that all these utopic realizations are actual, you know, even communist utopic realizations are still state-led. You know, for example, high modernism.
It's still a minority, isn't it? The building of the skyscrapers, the buildings of large parts of Paris and Brasilia, and all the rest of it, are actually a lot of founded by these sort of high modernist things, where we were sort of determined, you know, people needing the right amounts of food, air, and whatever, were actually devised by sort of utopic visionaries like Le Corbusier. And they are completely devoid of any historical and cultural colour. It's all just
it is all just devoid of actual difference in opinion and culture and idea and randomness of action. You know, I mean, I actually prescribe. Hold on. I actually very much diagnose, you know, the idea maybe we could actually have an external device that randomly chooses our actions for us. This sounds very contradictory to being like, you know, autonomous and, you know, mastering your own will, but in doing so you may actually realize lots of parts of ourselves that we repress, and loads of selves that never heard a voice. When given the randomness to actually like watch that come into being, we can find ourselves like, oh well, actually I'll go to this weird bar in Hawkins just to see, or whatever. Like, I'll go out of town and have a drink there on my own. Or like but I'm always like pulling out random examples. The thing about it is that, you know, there are all of these random examples, and then none of them are the same. You know, there is such a big potentiality of things that we can do, but we don't feel it at all. We feel that there are one or two options.
Yeah. Because it's like just doing something that you wouldn't do otherwise, but something different, because you might get a different outlook on your own life.
I mean, like, even the podcast, I find, like, you know, I did a podcast a few days ago, so I have to do one now. This doesn't feel like, I mean, I feel like on a wider scheme, I might be leading to virtue in the sense that, like, you know, I'm sort of putting the word out there, man. But I find that, like, you know, if I wanted to just, if I wanted to just stop doing this podcast and talk about something completely different, theoretically, this would be something that I could be able to do, and something that wouldn't actually wouldn't actually result in any you know, prejudice from other people. I don't think that would be a sort of I think that would be a very realistic thing to think at all. The idea that we can sort of speak our minds and act our minds as we actually wish, which is, you know, very. I'm sort of rambling now, but this is something that we.
What's the idea of the device that carries out your, not decides, but I guess carries out what your
opens up your ideas. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What are other potential means to autonomization? One may, with assistance from an external device, even randomize their actions and so inhibitions, and in the leaving of their actions up to fortune, discover, converse, freedom to act autonomously that is free of deep-rooted conceptual shackles. All of these may be said to increase autonomy if the mechanisms that equip us are free from ideological coercion.
Perhaps your book has said device.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, if we're thinking like completely realistically and with the things that we have now, like, we know with technology we have now. What about an app that creates the idea, like an app that like gives you the notions of oh well, you know, today you're going to, you know, have this for breakfast, or you have to go to this location, you have to do this, or you have to go to this location. You have to say this to a stranger. I don't know. I haven't thought about it too well, so maybe other people can think about it instead. But there'd be like a genuine like an actual.
What was the name of that app that tells you to go to a random?
Randonautica.
Yeah.
Strange things attached to it, though. So
But
maybe some people
similar to that.
Maybe some
I guess,
people
right?
Similar to that. Maybe people really do find things that they actually were looking for because they actually went against the grain and a one-dimensional way of actually looking towards the future.
It's similar to
as if you're like on a line, as if the timeline sort of pushes things from the past into the future on in a way we can't help. This timeline does not exist. Motion of objects exists, but the timeline is a complete abstraction. But once we abstract it, we then think that is more of a reality than even just like the simple action of, oh, I'm going to go off and do this, or I'm going to do this, you know.
It's kind of like similar to sort of meeting new people or whatever, or I lost my train of thought, but I mean, like, I guess you when you like meet a new person who, well, or at least if that person becomes like a good friend of yours later down the line and stuff, you might not have gained those experiences without actually had initially gone out to that like new location or to that new sort of idea in life, or like quitting your job and getting a new job or like something like that, you're not gonna know until you do these things. But if you sort of like keep following your, I don't know if it's a thing that monks talked about with desire and volition, I think are kind of like two different things, where like the sort of volition would be, I think volition was a word, but the volition would be like your kind of like your long-term goal, and then your desires are your kind of like your maybe your hormones that get in the way, or kind of like your anxieties that will get in the way. So you might have this kind of like, as a weird example, you might have a volition to sort of like carry on your genes and have kids or whatever, but then your desire is just to like jerk off and bust a nut. And it's or like your volition might be to get healthier, get exercise, and your short-term desire is to kind of like just sit down and relax. Whereas it's it may not, well, I don't know, it's kind of like what you want, but only in that sort of short period of time, and it's only really what is immediately sort of comfortable to you.
Yeah, this is like, I mean, is there a third option maybe? You know, we have volition, like, you know, volition might be very susceptible to conceptual instinctuality, and then desire could be said to be very primally instinctual. Like, you're immediate. I think we should really look for a third option where it is simply autonomous will, and not a will that expects anything particularly. Because both seem to because both of these are instincts expect something particularly, and they expect that this thing will satisfy them sort of half-wittingly, because they know it won't really. The autonomous will is actually the sort of opening up of realizations that there is no objective end point, and we are constantly opened up to so many choices all the time, and so many different experiences and ways of interpreting those experiences, and it, you know, it's not something we have to try and understand either. I don't think we can just experience these sorts of the sort of like this sort of flicker of I just feel like doing this, but I don't think it's a logical idea. And sort of find some great joy in that. George says there's a tendency in revolutionaries to gatekeep. I think that's very true. You know, you're either with us or against us, kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Rather, there's a revolution happening every day with the whole. There is a revolution happening every day. It's just that the revolutions are caught up in the same conceptual games. So, you know, loads of things change all the time. You know, you have, you know, Bitcoin, you have these, you know, war, you have social movements, you have protests all the time. But I feel like all of these movements are still very much caught up in the same conceptual games.
I think there's a lot of divide in society in general, isn't there? Which might not really help with that, because there's a lot of things out there that are grey as fuck, but the misconception is that they're black and white, and you're with us or against us, right? Yeah, right. It's a little bit tricky to kind of let's see, I suppose, like defend yourself with a viewpoint that you have, which is sort of unpopular, because people, as an example, which is something kind of recent, because I spoke to the guy later on, and he was way more articulate, kind of one-to-one, which I don't know if it's like, not if it was own even, it might just be the kind of pressure you get when you're getting attacked online. There's the sort of like the topic of like clothing having a gender or whatever, right? Which like the sort of argument would be like, can a man wear a skirt or whatever without it mattering? And it depends what you mean by matter, right? Where the fuck was I going with this?
Yeah, I thought you were going to the capitalism. Yeah.
What were we talking about slightly before?
We were talking about sort of, you know,
the with us or against us, right?
Yeah.
So, well, one kind of like point that he made, which is very, very much so like making sense. There are going to be some clothings that are built for a certain sex, and like that's just kind of the way it is. Such as like bras for you're not particularly going to get a dude wearing a bra, because it's like it's pointless. But
What about a kilt, you know?
Yeah, of course, and that's something that he was like, oh yeah, well, good point. That's kind of something we can like both agree on. But I don't know, he made a point, but kind of like got, I think maybe misunderstood, or I don't know if it's maybe the way that he articulated online was bad, because there's definitely, like, you shouldn't debate online with text. It's just not like good, or you got, I don't know, you got to be prepared to kind of like go to the end with it, or go on like a debate or something that's like where you can actually kind of express these points a bit more coherently. But when it's like an online Facebook discussion, you're definitely going to have like one side that's like, we'll just jump on anything you say that's slightly off. You've had it before when you there was someone in America, New York, a lady who like owed some money or whatever.
She owed loads of, well, she got donated loads of money by like this person in the music group that I found. She asked for loads of money to pay for her rent from people, and then she started talking about like buying like all of this expensive like culinary equipment.
Yeah,
and
and you said one thing.
I said when are you going to pay back the people?
And it wasn't even.
When
I'd have to ask you to elaborate to kind of understand your intention behind it, but the other people were kind of like just, I suppose, just prejudge your statement to say that kind of person is a dickhead or whatever, you know, or just like he's definitely got this view. And I think that's a language issue as well, isn't it? You might say one thing and then it's just going to get totally misinterpreted. And especially when you've got these divides of like
group identity, you know.
Yeah.
We have to all acknowledge that we are all alone and we are all separate people.
Yeah.
In this sense. But like on a deeper level, of course, we're all connected, but we can't try and force the sort of connection with other people as agreeing on the same opinions. These things are superficial bollocks. In fact, if we allow ourselves to disagree, we can maybe
grow.
We can grow, and we can sort of accept the notion that there's an immutable connection that we have with people, not one we need to assert. Because if we try and assert it, we just imply that there wasn't one there to begin with.
George says, Holloway had a good point that society is an iced over lake, and that each mini revolutionary action is someone digging at the ice making cracks. Instead of making a unified revolution, we should accept that we have the same goal. Anarchism, after all, should let us do what we want, how we want, thereby linking the cracks. Right.
The same goal. It's true, isn't it?
We all,
Every politician, every citizen who has a political view is a bit of an easy way to say it, because politics might be a bit corrupted. But then again, that's me having a preconception of what a politician wants. But anyway,
I mean, you have to be able to speak eventually. So, I know exactly what you mean.
So a dude of a political view might sound vastly different to the other guy's political view, but they might kind of in the sense want the same. We've all got some sort of mutual agreement to kind of what we want in society. No one's really going to be like only one in a billion persons are going to kind of like want to, you know, kill disabled folk or whatever, something crazy extreme. But then the reason that one person might have the idea of like, oh, we should maybe do this about disabled people because like it has as like a kind of a shit point, it might have a strain on an economy or something like that. Most of the time, it's going to have some sort of like idea of like benevolence for someone, at least, or at least some sort of majority group, in a way.
Yeah, it just becomes like I think it just becomes very distorted and abstracted once we like.
We don't know what people want.
We don't know what people want. I mean, we need to stop like. We need to stop sort of implying that. Sorry about that. We need to stop implying that like we can sort of generate like these perfect things of what people want. We can't. People have to get what they want like themselves, and they have to.
You can't really give it to them, can you? Yeah.
You can't, I mean, like we are all masters of our own destiny. I think this idea that like
we could be prescribed something that everyone needs and wants is just an idea held by the elite, by the state. We are stuck.
we become like stuck to this benevolent father figure or the authority figure because or maybe because we're stuck with relationships with our fathers, but like bad, sort of like unhealthy relationships in the same way that we have an unhealthy relationship to authority. But the thing is that the way to get out of that is to realize that you are actually independent and free to determine your own path and completely responsible for yourself. And in the same way, the sort of the conceptual government just doesn't, you know, is like this sort of father that's trying to exercise power, when in fact the power doesn't exist. The father is dead. Like the government is a corpse. It doesn't actually, you know, there might be police officers that pretend to be representing the government, but the government doesn't really exist. It's just
Or it's not dead but never alive in the first place, right?
Yeah, so exactly. It was this, you know, it's like the sort of the bones of like a father figure or like a god or something, you know, that we left behind. What did George say? We
Don't
are
need a
all the
vanguard.
revolutionaries. We don't need a vanguard. Absolutely. We are, you know. I mean, to try and relate it to my book, I mean, I guess like the sort of the difference, but I call it real anarchism as opposed to the difference between conceptual anarchism, which is the sort of notion that, you know, anarchism can be conceptualized or to sort of as like a set of axioms or something, you know, which real anarchism, you know, real anarchism is much more slippery because you can't even talk about it. But you know, but we have to sort of point ourselves towards real anarchism, to sort of as like an ideal or whatever, not an ideal, but like a sort of a foundation. Because if we're just sort of saying, you know, like the sort of the communists would say, oh, this is what ideal society is, we completely lose our own power. George said, does the revolution need identity? Are we the working class, the masses, women, ethnic minority? Obviously, some identities have harder struggles. Yeah, I mean yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I don't.
I suppose the identity comes with what you're wanting to change in society.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way I could put it, really. So I suppose the like.
But the thing is, I think we all have lots. We aren't, you know. I think I think it's very important to identify someone as an ethnic person if they suffer in their own individual way, because of what they go through as a black person, for example. but we actually give them a tool, and we also impair them at the same time by calling them a black person, because they are a huge infinite. They are a person with infinite identity on all these sorts of different ways of interpreting their experience, on all the experiences they've had, on, you know, it isn't just height, weight, age, ethnicity. You are infinitely many things at once, and they're all contained inside of you, and this, you know, it makes you like a very sacred person. But if we were to actually be involved in real anarchism, we would find ourselves completely accepting of this person's infinite identity. We would find them. Oh, right, you know. You know, we're not helping black people be equal to whites in real anarchism, because we wouldn't. That sort of game would be ridiculous, if that makes any sense. We are all already infinite people, with strong with convictions and fears and hopes and all the rest of it. So we have to be very careful when we give people you're a black person, you struggle. Of course we have to understand that these people struggle differently. That's very important. But we have to understand that outside of the struggles, they are so much more than those people. It's a sort of a bit of a pinch to sort of say, I think, but yeah. Shall we
Just reading what George said.
I agree, Jimmy. Saying I'm black in a safe community could mean, hey, I'm black, we have gone through struggles, but here I am. But it can be negative saying I'm Jewish, and Nazi Germany obviously has. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it goes deeper than that anyway. I think I'm not just saying it has negative connotations because bad things could happen to you, but also because in how you perceive yourself outside of all of these other problems, you know. This idea that we
might even make you question, like, why are people targeting me, sort of thing. Is there something wrong with me? And then that gets you an identity crisis, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. We in some sort of ideal, real anarchist situation, whatever you want to call it, we would find ourselves, like individually autonomous and free to interpret our circumstances, not to sort of conform to this sort of notion of, you know, black people's suffering equals this, therefore we have to do X, Y, and Z, and A, B, and C to solve the problem, regardless of individual opinion or thought. I think these sorts of advocacies are still very much founded on the conceptual containers of, you know, glory and honor, perhaps, and you know, fighting for the greater good, like, you know, some sort of colonialist mentality. We are in fact already at the point we need to be. We're just not sort of manifesting it properly. I think we're sort of left. We're sort of left thinking, oh yeah, we are under control, and then it just sort of generates that circular notion that we're under control, and then we can't actually take part in sort of mini revolutions, such as, you know, or not saying no, like not paying for your drink, not doing this, not in spite of the powers that be, but because you want to do it. This is a big difference. This is a big difference between you, because if we do something in spite of a power, we are still giving it that power. We're saying, well, this power has made me angry. If we do things because we want to do them, we become empowered. I think, yeah. What do you think, George? We might wrap things up because it's been like an hour. I said, yeah. Yeah. I'll wait for George to see if he has anything to say, and then we can sort of respond to it, and then we'll finish up.
Oh, it's good having questions, input. I feel like Norm Macdonald show when they have questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you, George.
Thanks, George.
And remember, keep on rolling with the times. Just keep on rolling.
Keep on rolling with the times, man. Keep on rolling with the times.
Miss Shannon.
Shannon just called it. But you can watch back on it, you know.
Awesome.
Okay, right. So, I mean, Shannon, if you heard any of that, do you have any other questions? Because I am meeting someone in 15 minutes.
Who you mean?
I mean, Jake. I thought I don't think Rick was coming, but I'll come back in an hour.
I don't know if he needs you. Maybe he does. We'll see. But yeah, if you're back later, that's cool.
I will be. I don't think he was coming today.
You gotta be careful comparing things with the Nazi Germany. So they were real jerks.
Oh, thanks, Alex.
They were,
Thank you, Alex.
The more I hear about this Adolf Hitler guy, the less I care for him.
It's not even that bad a joke. Right, so. Okay, so I'm just going to thank our patrons. We thank Oliver, who says, yeah, I'll drink to that. We thank Rachel, who says, communism is for life, not just for Christmas. We thank Manny, who says, long live Wombstone. We thank Karos, who says nothing yet. And we thank Maisie, who says 9/11 was an inside job.
Please, someone, get at him regarding, like, any conspiracy. Even the most recent boring ones, like 5G and shit.
We need a conspiracy theorist to talk about it.
Just any kind of, you know, some kind of, doesn't...
I just want to see if there's anything else I can respect.
Trying to think of abstract thinkers.
Can we be held accountable for our actions? The basis that we have no control. I'll conclude this sort of saying, you know,
I'd like to free the argument.
Our conceptual selves are like a parasite, and in many sense, it's not our fault that we have these conceptual structures, but we're still very much responsible for getting them out.
Getting rid of them, right.
Our real selves, we are completely responsible for. But then again, we have to sort of be careful about what we mean by responsible. Do we mean responsible by like an ideal kind of, this is who, you know, this is what you should feel bad
that
for,
kind
this
of
is what you should feel
creates
good for.
Objective morality, right?
Right.
And it's kind of like you're supposed to do this because that is the will of
Exactly.
whoever created that objective morality. I think free will is an interesting one to talk about as well, maybe for a future one. And on that note as well, like, who cares if we don't have free will? Let's just do what we want anyway.
Alright. Thanks, guys. Till next time.
Bye.